Hello everybody. Welcome to this morning's Speakers for Schools virtual talk. We're delighted so many students from across our school network have been able to join us today. This session will last for around 45 minutes in total and will include our two fantastic speakers in discussion with one another before moving to student submitted questions. Questions for our speakers can be submitted via the Q&A function on the right hand side of your screen, and this will be open throughout the discussion for you to submit your questions. Unfortunately, we will not be able to answer all submitted questions. We have several hundred questions submitted and there's simply not enough time to answer them all, but rest assured we have received them. I'm delighted to welcome this morning's speakers, Richard Aylard, Sustainability Director, and Rebekah Kenyon, Senior Sustainability Awareness Advisor, both with Thames Water. Richard and Rebekah have kindly joined us this morning to talk about their careers, sustainability and lockdown, and our new appreciation for the environment. Richard and Rebekah, welcome to your first virtual talk. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Carly.
So Richard, I think you're going to get the ball rolling and then we will curate some wonderful questions for you in the meantime.
Okay, thanks, Carly. I'm Richard Aylard. I'm the Sustainability Director at Thames Water. I want to talk about Thames Water, about sustainability, but in the overall kind of picture of lockdown and what it means for us as a company, and perhaps for Rebekah and myself for our careers. So if I just start with a little bit about Thames Water. We are the water company that supplies water to 10 million people in London and out to the west, out in the Thames Valley, all the way out as far west as Swindon and beyond, and then out to places like Guildford, Bishop Stortford, Banbury. So a big part of the country. And we treat sewage from even more people. We treat sewage from about 15 million people. So what we do is we take clean water from the environment, we turn it into drinking water standards, put it through the pipes to our customers' homes. Then we collect up all their wastewater. Now, people tend to think of sewage, what comes out of the toilet, and yes, of course it is, but it's also mixed with water from the showers, baths, washing machines, dishwashers. So all that comes to our sewage works. We treat it to make it safe, put clean water back in the river, generate energy from the rest, and what's left goes out to farmland as a fertilizer. So it's a nice circle, because then the water goes back in the river and we can re-abstract it again. So that's Thames Water in normal times. And of course, in lockdown, we've had to do exactly the same, because people still want water and they're certainly still going to go to the toilet. But let's talk a little bit about my career briefly. You can probably see that Rebekah and I are at different ends of our careers, to put it politely. If I think back to when I started work in 1974, I'd never have been able to think about what the world was going to be like in 2020. And if I had, I certainly wouldn't have thought of COVID. The equivalent for some of you will be trying to think what the world's going to be like in 2070. So, you know, I've been working for a long time, which isn't necessarily a good thing. It's just a fact. And my career started, well, I went to school in Barnet in North London. I went to Reading University and I studied what would now be called environmental science. I then joined the Navy. From the Navy, I went to work in Prince of Wales's office for Prince Charles, and very fortunate there, because it was the mid-80s. Environment was becoming quite a big thing, and I was very lucky to mix with and meet and work with a lot of the sort of foremost environmental thinkers of the time. So I was working on things like climate change over 30 years ago, and seeing over that length of time how the whole debate has moved on has been absolutely fascinating. A word like sustainability didn't really exist before the mid-80s, but it's now become quite sort of central in our thinking, as we've begun to understand two principal challenges. One is, of course, climate change, what it's going to mean for the world, particularly if we don't get it properly under control. And the second one is the biodiversity crisis, the fact that we are really pressurizing the natural world, all the things that sustain our lives, more than it can properly cope with. So those are the two sort of underpinning things for sustainability. I'm going to talk a lot more about that in a minute, but that's quite enough about me. Now let's talk to somebody who is much closer to most of you in age, and Rebekah will talk a little bit about how she's got to where she has in her exciting career so far. Rebekah.
Hello, I'm Rebekah. So yeah, I've always been passionate about the environment and very interested in nature. So you'll always find me outside in the garden when I was a child playing with my pets, and I'd always prefer to go for a walk in the countryside over shopping in town. So as I was growing up, I've always known I wanted an environmental type job. I studied physical geography at Lancaster University, which didn't just focus on rivers and glaciation, but I chose modules that brought in that human side of geography, and so how communities and society interacts with the natural environment, and this absolutely fascinated me. So during university, when I was doing my dissertation, which was actually on the impacts of climate change on peatland and its impact on drinking water, catchy title, so I did an internship at the local water company, and I found it so interesting with the variety of jobs there are, and hopefully you'll be able to see this as we discuss our roles in Thames Water later. So I knew that after university I wanted to work for a water company, as unfortunately we often forget that we are profoundly dependent on nature for our lives and livelihoods, and a water company is a perfect example of that. So many people don't understand where their water comes from and what happens to the stuff that you flush down the toilet afterwards, and the challenges that are faced to provide both these services. So I'll talk a bit about my roles at Thames Water now and what I do. So I started in wastewater communications, and this is more of an internal communications, sharing the important messages around health and safety, performance, anything that colleagues needed to know. And doing it in the way that was most effective, so either by videos or posters or actually going to sites and speaking to the colleagues themselves. So that was the most exciting, actually going onto an operational site and going into the sewers to meet the operational teams. A year later, I moved into a stakeholder engagement role for a major sewer project. This was more of an external focused role, speaking to customers and councillors and MPs. And through this, I actually got to spend some time in the House of Commons to understand what goes on and understand the role of an MP. And then I moved into the sustainability team. So I'll talk a bit about what I do now in that team, and then I'll pass on to Richard to talk about the wider department. So I'm in a small team of 2 people. It's officially called the Climate Change and Sustainability Team. We don't have a strategy, but we have a policy of intent. So we want to help the company become more sustainable. It covers all areas of the business, from efficient operations to finance in the long term, working with communities and improving access to our sites, having a safe and sustainable workforce, working with education and health and safety. But we're not doing all of this. It is a shared responsibility, sustainability. So working with all areas of the business, we support and help develop ideas so the teams can help the business become more sustainable. So yeah, I'll pass back to Richard now to talk about the wider department.
Thanks, Rebekah. The wider department is what we call corporate affairs, which sounds really dull. It's not actually. It's the bit of the business that's out talking to the outside world, explaining what we do, asking questions, making sure that we're providing what they want. So we talk to members of parliament, we talk to lots of local councils, we talk to environmental groups, it's wildlife trusts, Friends of the Earth, Greenpeace, groups like that. We talk to local community groups who are interested in what happens on our water treatment work sites and our wastewater sites. We talk about what actually we take from the rivers and what we put back in with the treated sewage. We answer all their questions, and we really work in partnership with them to make sure that we're not just doing the basics of providing water and treating people's wastewater, but we're actually building partnerships, doing good things with local people. We're going to talk a bit about that in a minute. Now, I used to run that whole department, and sustainability was always part of it. I'm now just working on sustainability because it's a really, really important thing for us for Thames Water. But why is sustainability so important? Well, it's because if we don't operate sustainably, we can't go on for the long term. The most well-known definition of sustainable development goes back 30 odd years, and it talks about meeting the needs of the present, that's us, without compromising the needs of future generations, that's you and your children and your grandchildren in the process. So we've got to look at this in the long term. The other more light-hearted way of talking about sustainability is it's living on this planet as if we mean to stay. We've got to be able to keep going for many, many hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of years. And if we keep going as we are, that isn't going to happen. Life's going to become very different, very unpleasant. We're going to start running out of things. And the things we're going to run out of are not so much minerals, because you can always recycle those. But we're going to run out of options. We're going to run out of the natural services that keep giving us the clean water, the fresh air, the food that we need. All that's got to be looked at really carefully, and the more we distort the climate, the more difficult that's going to be, and the more we destroy the natural world. That's everything from the rainforests, which really are the lungs of the world, and you can find out why if you go on Google and have a look, right through to the rivers and streams that catch the water that we need to keep ourselves clean and washed and hygienic and feed ourselves. So it'd be really interesting to hear in a minute what sustainability means to you, but what it means to us is actually being able to not just run the business for the long term, but being part of a society that's really planning ahead for the long term. So, you know, we've seen huge changes over time, but in the process, we've also learned as a society an awful lot more about the challenges. We know more about climate change. We know more about the destruction we're inflicting on the natural world. We're probably the first generation that knew all this stuff, because we've got huge amounts of information and data. We may also, I'm afraid, be the last generation that's really got the opportunity to do something about it. Things are happening, they're not happening fast enough. We need lots of pressure from everybody, including all of you, to keep them happening if we really are going to function sustainably. So if we just move on a little bit and look at what we've seen in COVID, because that's been really quite interesting for us as a business. So I think the first thing to say is that we had to get used to operating as key workers. So there's a slide there, and you can see a lovely little note that some local children pinned to the railings on one of our sites. Thank you for giving us clean water. And we've also joined in very much with other key workers. So what you can see on the right there is our Tilehurst water tower. That's full of water, and it maintains pressure in an area of Reading. It's been there for the best part of 100 years, and we've got a local lighting company to light it up blue as our contribution to thanking the NHS for keeping us all really safe, which has been a huge feature, of course, in all our lives over the last few years. So water supplies had to go on as usual. But things have been different because we supply water both in London, which is where, you know, a huge number of the office buildings are, and we supply water in areas where most of those people who work in the offices live. And if the people who normally work in London work at home, we need a lot less water in London. We need a lot more water in the areas where they commute into London from, where they're at home. And of course, I know most of you will have been at home. Your parents will have been using water in the house rather than where they work. And in our area, where lots of people commute long distances into London and where the water supply isn't all connected up, the bits in London, we've had plenty of water, and some of the other areas, although we've got plenty of water in storage, we haven't been able to treat it to make it safe and get it through the pipes fast enough. You can put more and more pressure on the water to go through the pipes, but you can still only get a certain amount through. So we've had to really try hard to make sure that we weren't having problems with low pressure. The particular problem we had when the very hot weather day after day was lots of people watering their gardens, of course, because they were at home seeing their gardens and they matter an awful lot to them, but also filling big paddling pools, sometimes refilling them every day. And we have to say to people, look, please just take it easy on the water, because otherwise we may not be able to supply you with everything that we want. So using water carefully, really important, especially at the moment. The other thing is we've had a lot more access to our sites. We have lots of green spaces. You can see here again some slides on the key workers, making sure that water is supplied to all those buildings. We had to do a lot of work very quickly to get the Nightingale Hospital up and running. Remember, that's the huge hospital that was created almost overnight at the Excel Centre. Well, of course, hospitals can't operate without water. They need huge amounts of it to keep people washed and hygienic and safe, to do all the hand washing that's required, for doctors and nurses to shower after their shifts to make sure that they were not contaminated. And we had to do all that without blocking the streets, because if we block a street, then the ambulance can't get through. So it's put a very high pressure on our workforce. I'm sure a number of your parents are also key workers. I think it's brought out the best in everybody over the last few months. So if we go on to the next slide, next picture, you can see here the wide range of customers that we have to look after in lockdown. On the left there, you can see that's the River Kennet. It's near Marlborough in Wiltshire. It looks lovely. It's a wonderful rural area. It's part of old England. On the right, you've got a scene right in the middle of London. That's people fishing on the River Thames near Barnes. Not something that would have been happening during lockdown, but again, you can see that it's a really wide range of areas that we have to cope with, and all water companies are like this. They've all got dense, or mostly got dense urban areas, and then they've got areas out in the countryside. So if you just move on again, this just shows the kind of challenge that we face every day. Every person in one of those buildings wants to have water to keep their hands washed, to keep properly sanitized. They want to be able to flush the toilet. It's important to them to be able to go back to work and have all those services connected. But then there's other uses for water. Don't forget, we also rely on water for firefighting. So the fire engines have got to have hydrants with high pressure water available. That's got to be available underground as well, so we can keep the tubes safe. So all of those things are all part of the day job, and trying to make all that work during lockdown with travel restrictions, people working from home as much as possible, trying to keep social distancing, it's given us quite a few interesting problems. Fortunately, as a company, we have detailed plans that are all ready for any kind of an emergency, and a lot of those were dusted off and used quickly. One of the problems we found was that we have big customer centres where customer agents take calls from customers who haven't got water, got a problem with their bill. We couldn't use those customer centres because people would have been sitting so close together. So we had to get all our computer systems and telephone systems rewired over a space of a week or so lots and lots of people could work from home. And we'll talk more about the implications of that in a minute. The other thing is that, as I was mentioning earlier, quite a lot of our sites where we do our work have we allow the public into them. So if we move on to the next picture, if you can just see on the right there, first of all, those blue sort of lozenge shapes in the middle, those are our North London reservoirs in Walthamstow and moving up towards Tottenham and Enfield. And that's where we store water from, which we take from the River Lee, and then we treat it and we give it to our customers to use. So about 3 million people a day use water from those reservoirs. So they're really, really important to us. But if you can see just how densely populated the area is, all around there is about 250,000 people who live either in tower blocks or in terraced housing, don't have gardens, don't have green space. And you can see right in the middle there, we've got a lot of green space all around our reservoirs. So if you look at the top left picture, that's the old Victorian pumping station that we've restored, and those are visitors enjoying the sights. And when lockdown occurred, we had to think long and hard. Well, do we just shut the site? That would be the safest thing to do, wouldn't it? Just ask people to stay away. And then we thought, well, where are they going to go? How are they going to get a break? How are they going to get fresh air? So in the end, we worked with the council and with London Wildlife Trust, who run the site with us. And we decided that if we were really careful, we could keep the site open. And it's been a huge success. We've had to put up lots more signs. We've had to put on more security because not everybody's been behaving well. But actually, we've had over 200,000 visitors to that site during lockdown. And we know from talking to visitors how important it's been. So we're really pleased we've been able to keep that going. At the same time, of course, all our employees have been working on all our other sites, and they've actually seen quite a change in the wildlife that lives around them during lockdown. So if we go on to the next picture, these are some of the pictures that our staff have taken on site. So you can see a water vole on the left there. He's probably somewhere near that lovely clean river I showed you a minute or two ago. Top right is, I'm pretty sure, an elephant hummingbird, hawk moth, an elephant hawk moth, sorry, which is a very big moth, and we've seen a lot of those around our sites. Down the bottom there, you've got a blue tit taking nesting material that somebody's left out for them, and of course we've had lots of foxes on our sites as well. So the reduced number of people about during the day has certainly helped wildlife quite a lot, and we've been getting all our colleagues to share photographs like that, keep everybody in touch, keeping them thinking about what's really important to the business and to our customers all through lockdown. And I think probably on customers, I'm going to hand over to Rebekah there, because she's been dealing quite a lot with some of our web pages during COVID. Rebekah.
Yes, so we have a dedicated web page and relevant links around COVID, providing just information about what we're doing, what extra activities we're doing for COVID, and also some information for financial support for our customers. You may also be aware of the loo roll shortage, and this has caused us a few issues with our sewerage network. So we've seen a 20% increase in the number of blockages since the start of lockdown. So this is people flushing the wrong things down the toilet, things that they shouldn't flush. So that's wet wipes, sanitary products, anything else that's plastic really. And also whilst washing up as well, pouring fats and oils down the sinks, they just congeal into these smelly masses in our sewers and can block it, which causes problems for customers in terms of sewer flooding and also the environment as well, spilling out into local watercourses. On the right hand side, this is some of the rag, we call it, wet wipes and plastic items that we've taken out the inlets at our sewage treatment works. So there really is a big issue there. We also, if we go on to the next slide, we do actually self-generate 23% of our own electricity needs from renewable sources. So we take what you do flush down the toilet and turn it into biogas, which is stored in these ginormous silver onions, digest as we call it. And then we also do have other renewable sources such as wind turbines and solar panels. We've also seen, so talking about the things that we've seen at work now, negatives could be an impact on mental health. So we're missing out with these social interactions with colleagues. We do have support from our mental health first aiders at work. So there are some negative impacts around there, but also we have seen a reduction in emissions. So firstly, globally, with less people driving into the offices, but Thames Water has also reduced its emissions from private and public transport by 15% by rolling out our video conferencing, and we did that in autumn 2019. So there's a benefit, there's benefits and negatives from both working from home. Also, I've been into the office since lockdown, and it has changed significantly. A lot less people there, and we've seen that, well, the cafeterias aren't there anymore, so less people are using disposables. So normally you go into the cafeteria and get a coffee cup, or maybe take some food away in containers, disposable packaging, and obviously we don't have that impact anymore. We've just got another slide up at the moment about our education team also doing some experimental videos showing you how we do generate renewable electricity from the sludge that we receive at our sites. On to personal impacts as well, I think, and then going back to the disposable materials that work from the canteen, I think we are generating less waste. I think we're more mindful about our consumption because we're having to take the bins out more. But then again, we're not actually, for me personally, I'm not going into town to stretch my legs and then end up buying some sandwiches and crisps and drinks. So I'm not actually disposing of that unnecessary material at the moment. But so we can see the waste that we generate in our homes, but do we have the same awareness with water consumption as well? So I know that I am using more water at home now. I can see it because I'm on a water meter. And at work, we have water and energy efficient toilets, and we have sensors on our tap. So that also helps us reduce water consumption. I'm shopping at a local farm shop now because at the weekends I had time to do it. And again, that's more sustainable in a way because I know where the food comes from. It's free range, slow grown. There's also less plastic packaging on the local produce as well. And benefits around working from home is I get to know my new neighbours. So I recently moved into my flat, and it's given me the opportunity to speak to my neighbours during the day when they're outside in the garden socially distancing, and at the weekends as well, when I normally wouldn't have been able to do that. I would, especially in winter as well, if I got home late, you just go straight into your flat and relax. So yeah, there are pros and cons to lockdown, and I think everybody has their own experiences. Coming to the last section now to talk about opportunities for the future. So is this sustainable? How to recover? So the pandemic has shown the importance of these essential services to be able to wash your hands and also flush away, going to the toilet. But unfortunately, it has we can see that there are many places in the world that don't actually have access to these services, don't have access to clean, safe drinking water. We do a lot of work with WaterAid actually to improve water and sanitation in countries that don't have these services. And how do we protect these resources for the future as well, especially where we are? There's a growing population, there's impacts with climate change. Lockdown has had an impact on the economy. Is this an opportunity for the future? How do we do this green recovery or build back better? We might have some opportunities for renewable energy generation as well. Again, I've already mentioned we already self-generate 23% of our own electricity needs. Is there something else or something more that we can do for the future? And can we contribute more to the circular economy? So we do have a new innovative treatment process for sludge, which might be able to contribute more to the circular economy, with carbon, precious metals that we find in our sludge, and the nutrients as well that farmers need. So question to Richard, do you think this current new way of working is sustainable, and is there now an opportunity to tackle some of these sustainability challenges, such as climate change, as a business and with governments and with society?
Thanks, Rebecca. Not an easy question. I don't think the current way of working is sustainable, but what it has done is it's shown us what we can do if we really put our minds to it. It's shown us opportunities for new ways of working. So we've all got much better. Some of us still not very good, but much better at this kind of discussion. You know, do I need to spend an hour a day going into London and back again to 2 hours a day on a train to go and see people in London? Yeah, sometimes I do, because you've got to meet people face to face, socially distanced in the future. But there's an awful lot that can be done like this, and it's actually very efficient, because when I'm sitting in my car driving into the office, because there's no easy public transport, I'm using up fossil fuels, and I'm using time that I could be spending more wisely. So I think there's lots of opportunities around this kind of working. I think we've also seen more opportunities, what you can do with cycling, walking, as you said, Rebecca. How often do I need to go to the shops? I'm actually growing quite a few vegetables this year, so when it's lunchtime I can just go out and pick a lettuce. That's quite nice. I'm enjoying that. It doesn't have to come packed in plastic, and it doesn't have to have fossil fuels to get to me. It's a minor thing, but if lots and lots of people grow their own vegetables, then that's a bonus. I think a lot of it's around travel, though. Just to what extent do we need to have? When you look at the commuter trains arriving into Waterloo, Paddington, King's Cross, and I'm sure Birmingham, Manchester, Newcastle as well, literally hundreds of thousands of people streaming off those trains. How many of them could actually now be working at home? And then I think the final thing really is it just shows the extent to which we can change the way we work, change the whole world if we want to. I mean, who would have imagined a year ago that we'd be sitting working like this? You know, masses of people working from home, social distancing. It can be done, and we can do the same with the challenge of climate change if we apply the same kind of focus to it. The problem is that unlike COVID, where you can track daily admissions to hospital, sadly you can also track the number of deaths, you can track the virus rate. Climate change isn't so easy to track in the short term, and it's easy to do the, well, yeah, I know it's important, but it's something I'll probably think about tomorrow. Actually, it's something we all need to think about today, because otherwise there isn't going to be too much of a tomorrow for too long, maybe for a few generations. But actually, if we really want to live sustainably, we do have to do things differently. And that, to me, is the lesson of COVID, is that we can, if we put our minds to it, if everybody pulls together, if we work out what we need to do, and then just push towards it. So, I mean, I hope that's been interesting on sustainability. Only able to scratch the surface in half an hour, but do please follow up, get some questions going in class, put some questions into us now, and we'll do our best to help. Thanks very much.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Richard and Rebecca. We've had so many questions submitted based on your presentation, which was absolutely fantastic. So I guess to start, we'll look at a few questions that students have had about your own kind of personal careers and journeys. Then we'll move on to personal impacts and questions young people have about what they can do for sustainability, and then wider kind of business and societal questions that young people have as well, if that's okay. So I guess something that comes up quite a lot in our events is our students asking who has inspired you or inspires you during your career and throughout your journey. So Richard, if you want to take that first, then we can move to Rebecca.
Okay, the person who inspired me, particularly in this area, is an American scientist called Rachel Carson, and very few of you will have heard her. Gold star if you have heard of her. Well worth looking her up. In the 1960s, she discovered that songbirds all over the part of America where she lived were dying, and she wrote a book called Silent Spring, which tracked why those birds were dying. And it was the first time anybody had really linked pesticide use by farmers to the effect on birds and other wildlife. And she got a tremendous amount of opposition. The farmers were furious. The agrochemical industry started lobbying against her. She was called a liar. She was accused of being unscientific. But she published a book called Silent Spring, which addressed all of these challenges head on and really silenced her critics, and was in many ways instrumental in starting the whole conservation movement, which has become the environmental movement. So to me, Rachel Carson, for doing the clever science to work out what was going on, and then being brave enough to see it through, she's inspired me.
That's fantastic, thank you. And Rebecca, is anyone who's inspired you throughout your career?
Yeah, so that's something that I learnt about in my education at school, but I'm gonna have to go with the classic Richard Attenborough, David Attenborough, sorry. So I grew up watching the programmes as a child, and he's so passionate about nature and enthusiastic, and so knowledgeable as well. And just the way that he communicates and engages with people, and just his style of speaking, it was just so inspirational, actually. So yes, it's just a passion around the environment and then how it relates with society. which then ultimately links in with the whole sustainability. We want to be on this planet for as long as possible. We want to protect it. We want to enhance it as well. I think, yeah, I'm going to have to go with the classic legend.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And we've also shared a little bit more information with our students about Rachel Carson. We just shared a link to Rachel's website as well. And the next question, we'll stick with you, Rebekah, if that's okay, is from Ariane. And Ariane is interested in knowing, when you're working, do you feel like you're helping people?
Yes, I like to think so. Yes, sometimes it can be quite challenging, especially with sustainability. I think it's a little bit easier now because of the discussions that we've been having and the prominence of these challenges, climate change and microplastics on the news. And again, with you being taught about it and learning about it at school, I think it is gaining more prominence. So yeah, it can be quite challenging, but also I love it when people have these ideas of whether or not we, I don't know, set up electric charging points, or how about we do something with plastics in the business. It's really useful, and they do come to us for help and support and providing an alternative perspective. So I think it was after Blue Planet and the episode on plastics. Lots of companies were talking about how to tackle plastics challenge, and we got a question saying, how do we eliminate plastics in the business? And we give this wider perspective that actually, no, we need plastics. We have plastic water pipes because they're more flexible and it reduces the risk of them bursting in the ground. We have plastic water bottles in our laboratories where we do the water quality testing, and that's for many reasons, including health and safety. If you smash glass, and also transportation, it's a lot heavier to transport glass bottles than plastic. So we give that wider perspective of, well, where can we make a significant positive difference? And we identified the cafeteria as one of them. So why do people have to have polystyrene Tupperware boxes? But there is a reason why. People might have to quickly get some food before going into a meeting and take it away. And you've got to think about the cost and about buying cutlery and plates and the water usage as well, about washing them all and managing them, collecting them, making sure people don't take them away and they go elsewhere. So we swapped our plastic packaging to compostable, which is less bad and it serves a purpose. So yeah, I do feel like I'm helping people sometimes, but yeah, it can be quite challenging as well.
Absolutely. And Richard, we have a specific question for you here that's been submitted from Caitlin. And Caitlin asks, over your career journey, what job have you enjoyed the most?
Hi, Caitlin. Yeah, well, I've had a lot of jobs. The most exciting was when I was in the Navy in the Falklands War, but I wouldn't say that I necessarily enjoyed that. To be quite honest, I've enjoyed all the jobs I've done. I wouldn't have done them if I hadn't. But I think, to be honest, I enjoy this one most. It's a sort of something I've been working towards over quite a long career now. And it's very rewarding, having a fantastic team of people like Rebekah to work with, but also to see how we're making a real difference and how actually, society is waking up to some of these challenges. And I don't feel anymore that we're kind of knocking on people's doors saying, wake up, they're actually more awake than we are. And we need to work with them, with our customers, to actually get some real solutions. I wish I had a magic wand, then we could do things so much faster. Everything we do, ultimately, our customers end up paying for on their water bills. So how much do they really want to pay on their bills? How much can they afford to pay? And bearing in mind that everyone pays the same, some of us might be able to afford it. What about the people who really can't afford it? How can we help them? So yeah, it's a very exciting time to be working in sustainability and for a water company.
Fantastic, thank you. And Rebekah, Sala has asked, how did you find your job? Was it something that you looked into kind of after graduation? What was it that I guess drew you to Thames Water?
Many reasons drew me to Thames Water. So whilst I was at university, I did an internship at a local water company there, and that's when I thought, oh yeah, I want to do something in the water industry. I thought about utilities and maybe renewable electricity, all that kind of stuff, but water I think is the best. And I chose Thames Water because it's, as of many reasons, innovation and the work they were doing with renewable energy. It was also fact that they're the largest UK water and wastewater company in the UK. So they have so many sustainability challenges in the southeast, which is a completely different area from where I'm from, up north. So it's water stressed, serves the capital. I actually applied to the graduate scheme, and unfortunately I didn't get on. So I got on the waiting list for the assessment centre, but I know the exact reason. It's because I did a terrible video interview. It's just, this was completely new to me, the video conferencing, but obviously with a lot of practice, hopefully I've got slightly better. But I know I was just, it was a bit of a blip. But I then submitted my CV into Thames Water, chose some jobs, went for a few interviews, and yeah, got offered the role in wastewater communications, which was a fantastic opportunity. I was right in the heart of the business, going out, finding all these informations, health and safety, operations, speaking to a lot of people within the business to be able to give these messages to the people that need it. And yeah, since then I've just, again, finding new opportunities, learning so much more, and understanding the business. So yes.
That's fantastic, thank you. Just moving on to the next kind of theme of questions that students have submitted. We've had a lot of questions around how students can personally impact on the environment and sustainability. So do you have any top tips for how students can live more sustainably? And then Richard, will come to you for your suggestions as well.
So is this me? Yeah.
Yes.
So as I mentioned before, I work for a water company, therefore I'm aware of water efficiency. I've just moved into a new flat, so with building regulations, it is actually slightly more water efficient. We've got taps on the end, appliances on the end of the taps, which is water efficient. You've got the dual flush. And also I think there's sustainable drainage as well. So the water from the drain pipes goes into a soakaway instead of into the sewers. Also, I've made active choices about how, because it's my first home, about what products to buy. So I've been sourcing more sustainable and ethically sourced items. I've bought a reclaimed wood chest for storage. I've learned a new trade as well during lockdown. So I've done some tiling. But the tiles that I did buy were made out of recycled glass bottles. And I've gone to a local farm shop now, so actively choosing more ethically sourced foods and responsibly grown. So yeah, there are lots of different things, and also being mindful of waste as well, about making sure you separate your recyclables, wash them out first as well, and make sure they're dry, so it makes it easier for the waste centres to process them. Yes, back to Richard.
Thank you. And Richard, do you have any top tips for our young people who are interested in living more sustainably?
Yeah, I think to do what students are good at, which is ask lots of questions. You know, just why are people eating asparagus that has come from Peru? Why do we have stuff that when you open the box, the cardboard box, inside there are 3 separate layers of plastic surrounding something that doesn't need anything around them at all? Just where has this come from? And I think also being prepared to challenge people. I took a petrol strimmer that wasn't working into a local workshop, a garage shop, to see if they could repair it. And they looked at it and they came back and said, it's in a bit of a bad way, and it was. It's going to cost 80 quid to repair it. And they said, but don't worry, we've got one on offer. We'll give you a new one for 110, and it'll last longer, and we'll dump the old one. And I was on the process of saying, yeah, well, that makes sense, doesn't it? And then I thought, no, this is ridiculous. Where's all that metal and plastic gonna end up? So I paid the 80 quid, and I could see the disbelief on the man's face. And it was, well, it's your choice, governor. And it was my choice. And I decided to pay the 80 quid. And I've now got an old strimmer, and it works, and it will carry on working, and probably eventually it won't, but for the time being, it's that kind of thinking, that kind of questioning of just why are we doing this? Is this really a good idea? Rather than just kind of going with the flow and doing what everybody else suggests. And it's that kind of questioning that's going to get us out of the kind of problems that we're otherwise going to end up in.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. Thank you. Just a very quick question before we move on to how businesses and governments can be more sustainable. Kristen has asked, roughly how much water is used to flush a toilet?
It's something like 10 litres. But toilet flushing accounts for about a quarter of all household water use. And one of the problems is that modern toilets are not actually as good as the old-fashioned ones because they've got plastic parts that wear out, and we have what we call leaky loos, and this is where part of the plastic has slipped or perished, and actually they're discharging water all the time, and you can waste up to 500 litres of water a day with a leaky loo. So it's not something anybody notices very much. Why would you? But just take a look and see whether your loo is actually discharging a little bit of water all the time, because actually if you're on a water meter it's going to put your bill up, and even if you aren't on a water meter it's a complete waste of water, all the energy that's being used to treat it. So yeah, toilet flushing is quite a big part of water use.
I think just to add on to that as well, we did something on our social media accounts, a questionnaire on Instagram, asking customers which ones they think is the small flush and the big flush on these modern toilets. So it can be actually quite interesting, and quite a few people, yeah, it can be quite confusing as well. So just educating yourself on which one's the big flush and which one's the small flush can actually help you save a lot of water as well.
Absolutely, that's great advice, actually. Thank you. So just moving on to a few other questions students have. I realise we're running out of time, but we'll try and fit a couple of these in. One of our students here has asked, what is the biggest change water companies could make to be more sustainable? I'm not sure who'd want to take that, Richard or Rebecca?
Yeah, I'll have a go at that. I think it's got to be around renewable. It's got to be around energy. So we've made a commitment to get to what we call net zero carbon. So we're not actually emitting any carbon into the atmosphere by 2030. And there's a number of things we're doing. A lot of electric vehicles being planned, a lot more energy efficiency. So fitting variable speed pumps, so they aren't just on or off, on at full speed or off. They can be variable speed. That can save energy. And then we're doing a lot to generate more energy. So Rebekah talked about getting energy from sewage through those stainless steel egg digesters. That's called a process called anaerobic digestion, and that gets about 40% of the energy out of the sludge, but the rest is still there. And if we've got a new technique that we're trying called pyrolysis, and if we can make that work, it'll get us from 40% of the available energy to 90%. So we'll then our sewage works will become energy factories, as well as where we clean up the sewage and put clean water back in the river. So all those things need to be invested in. They need to be thought about very carefully with the scientists and the engineers, of whom we have quite a lot, to see that we can make it work. But those are for us. I think a lot of it's around supplying water to customers, hoping they'll use it efficiently, but actually making sure we use minimal energy and generate as much as possible. That's going to make the biggest difference for a water company.
Fantastic, thank you. And one final question here, we'll take both of your thoughts on this, and Richard will go with you first, is many people are saying that due to COVID-19, we are having a better impact on the environment. Do you think things will return to normal after lockdown, or will society be more mindful of the environment?
Well, I certainly hope society will be more mindful of the environment. We've seen a big increase in people enjoying the outdoors, not flying off on holiday to Spain or Portugal or Florida, but actually enjoying their own local environment. And perhaps that enjoyment will then translate into thinking and caring about it more, and making sure that when we do build new ways of working, that we do them better, so that we build places that can be walked to, cycled to, that don't need big car parks, that don't involve huge amounts of transport, don't involve international flights where possible. There's a lot that can be done. Some of it will be done. The question is how much, and it needs everybody to be focused on getting as much as possible out of the new world that we're building for ourselves.
Fantastic, thank you. And Rebekah, do you think that that things will return to normal, or do you think that society will be more mindful of the environment after lockdown?
I hope so. But what COVID has shown us that the world can come together to tackle a pandemic, COVID-19. Can we do the same for environmental issues, for climate change? But then again, individuals, society, businesses and government all have a part to play, and very, very different parts, but they all have a part to play, individuals especially, by changing their consumer habits, preferences, and putting pressure on businesses and governments to do the right thing.
That's fantastic. Thank you both so much. And unfortunately, that is all we have time for today. But a huge thank you to both Richard and Rebekah for being with us this morning. And I think for having a really interesting dialogue, one about your own passions and what it is that interests you and your careers, and also about how we as a society and as individuals can be more sustainably minded. A huge thank you for making the time to be with us. A short announcement for our students. We have shared a feedback form in the Q&A thread, and it'd be wonderful if you could complete that. We've also shared the colour for today's talk, which is dark blue. You will only need that if your school or college has asked you to complete the student activity sheet for this talk. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we hope to see you for future virtual events this week. Have a great day, everyone.